Let's talk a little bit about firearms ownership and shooting in the United Kingdom and have a look at some of the firearms in my collection. Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. I'm also a member of the Muzzle Loaders Association of Great Britain and also the UK's NRA, National Rifle Association. And many of you know that I shoot and I do own firearms. But I've noticed when I do videos that a lot of people express surprise that I own firearms in the UK, because in many countries, I think particularly in the USA, there's a perception that in the UK firearms are completely prohibited and people can't own them and people can't shoot. And this is incorrect. We actually have quite a vibrant shooting community here, but we have to absolutely say, yes, the UK has very strict firearms licensing rules and ownership, and there aren't a huge number of firearms in the UK and there aren't a huge number of people shooting. To give you a rough idea, as of 2020 there's over 150,000, I think about 159,000 firearms certificates, equivalent to like a license, held by UK citizens, and that's out of a population of about 65 million. Shotguns are far more common. We'll talk about shotguns in a second and the differentiation between what we class as a firearm and what we class as a shotgun, and there's about 500,000, in fact more than 500,000 people in the United Kingdom who own shotgun certificates out of a population of 65 million. So while 150,000 firearms owners and over 500,000 shotgun owners in the UK might on paper sound like quite a lot, when you compare it to the population size, it's not actually huge. So actually we do have a relatively small number of firearm and shotgun owners in the UK compared to lots of other countries, even in Europe, but around the world. Now, it might seem strange to many of you watching this. I know that a lot of you in the USA and other parts of the world where firearms ownership is a little bit easier and simpler and more common, it might seem strange that I'm referring to firearms and shotguns. So if I just grab one of my shotguns here, we class these as separate things when it comes to licensing. So if I just put the bolt action rifle, we'll come back to the Lee Enfield in due course. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible. In the UK, you can either obtain a firearms certificate or a shotgun certificate. Now, shotgun certificates, as you'll notice from the numbers, over 500,000 people in the UK have shotgun certificates, are far more common and far easier to obtain. One example of how they're easier to obtain is that you can use a shotgun on your own land for pest control, for example, and you only need one referee to get your to get your shotgun certificate. A firearm, on the other hand, is far more heavily regulated. So in other words, this is a smoothbore versus rifled issue. So firearms in the UK are classed as anything with a rifled barrel or indeed anything with a short barrel. So if you had a smoothbore that was particularly short, and we'll talk about pistols in a second as well, then that would be classed as a firearm rather than a shotgun. So there's a length limitation on what classes as a shotgun. It has to be over a certain length. Firearms are far more strictly regulated in terms of where you can shoot them, what you can do with them, what you can use them for. So on your firearms certificate, you have to list whether you're using it for target shooting or if you're using it for hunting or pest control or all of the above. And in addition, they are a firearm certificate is a little bit more complicated to get. For example, you need 2 referees instead of 1. Now, in the UK, the general trend is that people owning shotguns fall into broadly 2 categories. It's either people using them in agricultural areas for pest control and, you know, keeping rabbit populations down or shooting crows, that kind of thing, or indeed for pheasant shooting and grouse shooting, these kind of things. Or they use them for sporting purposes for clay pigeon shooting, usually at a shooting club of some kind. And obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but clay pigeon shooting is a hugely popular sport in the UK. And actually, it's quite common for people who don't have a shotgun certificate or a firearms certificate to go on clay pigeon shooting days. So it's a popular team building activity, for example, for office workers to go for a day clay pigeon shooting at somewhere like Bisley. It's quite a common activity. So a lot of British people do actually have exposure to shotguns, particularly shooting clays, at some point in their lives. Firearms, in contrast, the vast majority of people in the UK using these are using them on shooting ranges for shooting targets. Yes, indeed, there are people that do deer stalking, there are people that use these for shooting rabbits and things like that to keep down rabbit populations, and pest control as well, and there are professional pest controllers who have firearms, obviously, for controlling fox populations and things like that. But by and large, I think by far the greatest number of people in the UK who own firearm certificates for shooting rifles and various types of pistols, again I'll get to pistols in a second, use them on ranges for shooting targets. Now, many of you will be aware that in 1997, under the outgoing Tory government at the time, John Major's government, as they were going out before the Labour government came in, they passed a ban on handguns, a general ban on handguns in the UK, and this was a response to a very horrible incident that happened, but I won't go into here. But essentially, handguns for general use, modern handguns, were outlawed in the UK. So this does mean that, generally speaking, people who shoot, people who have a firearms certificate in the UK, don't have access to most modern handguns. However, there are exceptions to that, and the way that the law was written meant that there are exceptions for broadly three main groups, for general shooters anyway, three main groups. And there's something called the long-barreled pistol. Essentially, if you have a pistol with an extended barrel on it, and usually this is hidden inside a pretend sound moderator to make it look a little bit less unsightly, and if it has a extension coming out of the back, like a stock or indeed a counterbalance essentially, then the total length of the weapon goes over what the law was brought in to ban, and therefore you can have something like a modern handgun like a Glock, or even a modern form of 1911 or something like this, a SIG or whatever, that has an extended barrel and has an extension at the back, and you can shoot those. The theory being that those are not concealable, those are not things that are likely to be used in crime. They're very heavily regulated, just the same as other firearms in the UK, and obviously they have to be locked in cabinets and everything like that. Additionally, another group of pistols that escaped this kind of general ban, the pistols that I shoot, which are muzzle loaders, okay, and that's quite simply because they don't use modern commercially produced ammunition. They don't use 45 Colt or 9mm or whatever. They are front loaders, okay. So this is a replica by Uberti, now on half cock, of a 1851 Colt Navy, and quite simply this is loaded from the front of the cylinder, okay. So because it's loaded from the front of the cylinder, usually with separate powder, wadding and ball, that doesn't come under the general handgun ban. So we'll have a look at my pistols in a second. So muzzle loading pistols, and that does include single shot pistols as well, or double barrel pistols, anything that's front loading, muzzle loading, you can still shoot in the UK on a firearms certificate. And the third group is a particular section of firearms licensing, which is for what are called heritage firearms. And this actually covers a broad range of firearms, not just pistols. But it does mean that under that category, and it's not that easy to get, you have to be essentially recommended and sponsored by someone to apply for this variation to your firearms certificate. It does mean that you can shoot pistols which can use modern ammunition in some cases, but are of historic interest for research purposes. So, for example, many of the World War II pistols, things like Webley revolvers or Lugers, if we go back, broom-handle Mausers, Colt 1911s as well, you can actually own and shoot these in the UK under this historic research kind of clause in firearms licensing. But those have to be kept at a shooting club. You can't keep them in your gun cabinet at home. They have to be kept on site and are only shot. They're not shot for competition purpose, they're shot for research purposes. Now, going to shotguns specifically, shotguns have a few things. So generally speaking, a shotgun on a shotgun certificate can hold up to 3 rounds of ammunition. You can own a semi-automatic shotgun, you can own a pump action shotgun or a lever action shotgun, and they can hold up to 3 rounds. If you want your shotgun to hold more than that, for example, if you want a pump action shotgun with up to, whatever, 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds in it, or indeed if you want a semi-automatic shotgun, which can have unlimited ammunition capacity, even including a drum magazine, then you can get those, and you can get those on a firearms certificate. They can only be semi-automatic, they can't be fully automatic. However, you can have a semi-automatic shotgun, a military type semi-automatic shotgun with a drum magazine in the UK. You can shoot it. They use them in tactical shooting competitions, which look an awful lot of fun, something I might like to have a go at one day. But absolutely, and there's no magazine restrictions placed on those shotguns. So you can do that, but in that case, when you go above that 3 rounds per for the gun being held in the magazine, when you go above 3 rounds, then it goes onto a firearms certificate, which, as I've explained, is more stringently policed than a shotgun certificate. But you can get those things and you can shoot those things in the UK. Now, in terms of rifles, the general rule is that single shot rifles or bolt action rifles, we basically have access to pretty much everything in the UK. So bolt action rifles you can have in just about any caliber, as far as I'm aware, all the way up to, some people shoot Barrett 50 cal rifles on very long ranges, sort of mile long ranges. Obviously, we don't have access to the anti-material rounds that some of those massive caliber rifles were intended to shoot. You only use target rounds, but nevertheless, you can shoot those very large caliber bolt action rifles in the UK. Not many people do it. I think last time I checked, there's something like only 50 people in the UK shooting those. It's a very fringe activity and they're very expensive rifles. But generally speaking, most people in the UK shooting rifles are shooting things like this 303, or they're shooting 7.62, or they're shooting 2.2 rifles. Now, on the subject of 2.2, so the general rule is that if it's a single shot or manually reloading rifle, okay, then you can have it pretty much in any ammunition, so long as you have a place to shoot it and things like that, which generally means being a member of a shooting club. But you can own semi-automatic rifles in the UK on a standard firearms certificate in only 22 LR. Okay, so we can't own AR rifles in 5.56 or military rifles in 7.62 or anything like that in semi-automatic, but we can own semi-automatic rifles if they're in 22 LR. Which obviously is a very small round, but it's perfectly fine for target practice and plinking, and it does mean that that opens up certain competition categories to us, tactical shooting, whatever, these types of fun types of shooting you can do with semi-automatic rifles, and we can do them with a 2.2. Or you can do them, as some people are now doing them, with the semi-automatic shotgun. So if you want to do semi-automatic shooting, tactical type shooting competitions, your basic choices are to go down the 22 LR route, which is very cheap actually, because the ammunition, as you know, is very cheap, or you can go down the shotgun route, which has a lot of power and will knock targets down, but is obviously more expensive to run. Now, this has been a relatively quick skim through of what we are currently allowed to shoot in the UK, the main categories, and obviously there's a few other small things which I won't go down those routes, but these are the main shooting categories in the UK, either shotgun or firearm. Within firearms, we've essentially got bolt action rifles, semi-automatic in 22. You've additionally got sometimes the very large caliber bolt actions, which are done at very long range. Additionally, you've got the long barreled and extended stocked pistols. You've got muzzle loading guns of all sorts. You've got muzzle loading smoothbore muskets, which will go on a shotgun certificate. You've got muzzle loading rifles, which will go on a firearms certificate. You've got muzzle loading pistols, which we'll look at in a second, which would also go on a firearms certificate. Additionally, you've got the heritage pistols, which you can also look into. Now, there is a final sector which we should mention, and that is there is a perception, even amongst some shooters in the UK, that there are certain things, for example like a machine gun, which you just can't own, and that's not strictly speaking true. So as you will notice, Britain has a rather vibrant film industry, and you will have noticed that in movies set in the World Wars or even James Bond films or whatever, they use automatic weapons, and they are real automatic weapons shooting blunts. Blunts. I'm too used to swords. So quite simply, we do have access to those things if you fulfill the right criteria, and there are a lot of hoops to jump through, and you essentially need to be a fully qualified armourer, and that needs to be your job, pretty much. So there are people absolutely working as armourers, working as people who work with museums as well, people, obviously gunsmiths, and people who work with the film industry, who have jumped through enough of the hoops and fulfilled enough of the criteria that they indeed can own pretty much any type of firearm within, basically any type of firearm that you might want to use in a movie, essentially, or for a documentary purposes or anything like this. So yes, that includes machine guns, that includes artillery, tank guns, all kinds of stuff like this. So absolutely, in the UK, you can get access to an AR-15, or you can get access to a Lewis machine gun, but you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get to the position whereby you can own that thing, and they have to be stored and kept in very specific, secure circumstances. So just to finish off, I'm going to give you a quick run through of not literally all the firearms I own, but most of the ones that I actually get the most use out of. So the first one you saw here, this is actually it's a hammer gun, a breech loading shotgun. Okay, and this is an original antique with an underlever, there we go, and Damascus barrels. You might be able to see the pretty Damascus pattern on there. Very nice looking old gun, and this is made by P. McLagan, who I assume is a Scottish maker, from about 1900-1905, if I remember correctly. Very nice hammer gun. It's nitro proofed, so originally it would have been proofed for black powder, and then it's been reproofed to nitro, and it's got good barrels on it. It doesn't see a lot of use, but it's a very, very sweet gun, very nice shotgun to use. I should also mention as well that Smoothbore Muskets, which is here's an example of one I own, they also go on a shotgun certificate because they're not rifled. So that's actually a gun that I'm probably intending to sell because I don't use it an awful lot. But if you want to shoot smoothbore muskets, it's actually relatively easy. It's just the same, legally it's just the same as a muzzle loading shotgun. I should also mention, you know that I own things like Martini Henrys and muzzle loading Enfield rifles and so on, and these are antiques that I don't shoot. If you own an antique firearm that is uses obsolete caliber, and I didn't really go into the depths of obsolete caliber because it's quite complicated in the UK, but if it doesn't use a commercially produced modern round, then it's classed as obsolete caliber. There's a few exceptions to that, which I won't go into here, but something like a Martini Henry, for example, you can own an antique Martini Henry. It's fully functioning, but you can't buy the ammunition for it, so you can't go out and buy the ammunition and shoot it. And in any case, even if you could buy the ammunition, you'd need a firearms certificate to buy the ammunition. And even if by some weird chance, some commercially produced ammunition fitted inside the breech of an antique gun, you'd still need a firearms certificate to buy that ammunition anyway. But an antique firearm that is either muzzle loading or uses obsolete caliber ammunition, you can own without any firearms certificate, so long as you don't shoot it, and it can hang on your wall, and that's absolutely fine. If you want to shoot the Martini Henry, for example, so if you're going to make the ammunition, you're going to buy the various components, and you're going to self-load, then you need to put it on a firearms certificate, and then you also need a firearms certificate to buy the propellant and the parts to make the ammunition as well. So my antique Martini Henry is an example. I could shoot it, but I don't currently shoot it. And because I don't currently shoot it and it's obsolete caliber, it's not on my firearms certificate, and it doesn't need to be. Right, so we've looked at the shotguns. Okay, so that's one thing I shoot. Not so much now as I used to. I used to shoot shotguns mostly. Now I mostly shoot rifles. So we'll go straight to the 303 because you've already seen that. So this is an original 1916 dated, I think. Yes, 1916 dated, Enfield made, SMLE, short magazine Lee Enfield. And it takes 10 rounds, 303 British, and is an original World War I rifle that was rebarreled and reissued in World War II. What a lot of people don't know, because they think of these as World War I rifles, is these were still being used extensively in World War II, and they were the standard British Empire rifle for the first half of the Second World War, and in fact they were still being used right the way up to the D-Day landings. You see them in photos. They were gradually replaced by the number 4 Lee Enfield, but they were, still a well-made and very good rifle, and a lot of people are shooting them still on ranges today. Very cool rifle to shoot. Being .303, it's quite a high energy round, so you can't shoot it on short ranges most of the time, pretty much 100 yards minimum. Okay, right. Next up is one of my absolute favourites. It's my Winchester Yellow Boy replica. So this is made by Uberti of Italy, and rather than the original 44 rimfire that these were chambered in, this is actually chambered in 45 Colt. And I can shoot this on the gallery range, anything from 25 metres or yards upwards. So I tend to shoot this on moving targets sometimes, and I adjust the distance of the targets because it's electronic, and I tend to shoot this between 25 metres and up to 100, well, about 80 metres actually, and I sometimes have the target coming towards me as I shoot as well, which is good fun. So this is a lovely, obviously it's what a lever action is, just take the catch off there, so it loads like that. This is obviously these are all empty and have all been checked. But that is so much fun to shoot. I absolutely love shooting the Winchester. Probably my favourite rifle. And we'll get to the revolvers in a second. Then the other rifle that I've recently acquired, and I haven't even shot yet, my very first black rifle. So this is a HK416 by, HK416 lookalike by Umarex of Germany. And this is in 22 LR. So this is a semi-automatic rifle, chambered in 22, can take magazines of any capacity in the UK. Interesting point, in the UK, sound moderators are not as difficult to get hold of in the UK as they are actually in America. So I know some states it's very difficult to get sound moderators in, but actually in the UK you just have to have it added as a thing on your firearms certificate, and then you get one. I currently don't use one because I don't need one. But yes, essentially that's the Umarex kind of look-alike of the HK416, and you can get usually use a 20 round or a 30 round magazine. You could stick a drum on it if you wanted to. There's no limitations to that in the UK. Finally, pistols. So currently, I only shoot muzzle loading pistols. You've seen a glimpse of the Colt Navy already. I'm in my future, when I'm older, I think I would like to go into the heritage pistol shooting. I'd like to look at Webley revolvers and Colt 1911, things like this. World War I and II pistols essentially, but currently it's not something I do. But essentially the two pistols that I currently shoot are both Uberti replicas of the Colt 51 Navy. So that is a pistol that was used, as well as obviously in America, it was also used in the Crimean War. And one of the reasons, this was the first pistol I got, one of the reasons I got this is because obviously I'm particularly interested in British officers' equipment and armament and training of the mid-Victorian period, and the Colt Navy fits into that. And then the second pistol I got was the Colt Dragoon. So this is chambered in 36 muzzle loading, and this is chambered in 44 muzzle loading, which means you actually squeeze a 45 ball down the 44 tube. And I much prefer the Colt Dragoon personally. Some people find it heavy. This has also got a removable stock as well, actually. It's got a shoulder stock, but I have literally never used the shoulder stock. It's over there in a box somewhere. So it does have a removable stock, which is quite funky, but I never use it. Some people say that the Colt Dragoon, this is the third model, incidentally, third model Dragoon. Some people say these are heavy. Personally, I wave swords around a lot, so I don't find it really a problem. And this is far nicer to shoot. It has less problems, mechanical issues than the Colt Navy. The main problem I have with the Colt Navy is that the percussion caps, once they're burst, can fall down in the mechanism and jam it. That does not happen so often, or hardly ever actually, with the Colt Dragoon, partly because all the parts are bigger, the gaps are bigger, and the percussion cap's the same size. So the percussion cap is less of an obstruction if it falls anywhere in the Dragoon. Also, this has a bit more kick to it, has a bigger bullet, and it's just a lot of fun to shoot. Now, you will also know, if you're a regular viewer of the channel, that I do own other antique revolvers, particularly Adams and Beaumont Adams, and I consider them superior pistols, superior sidearms to the Colts. But those are antiques. Currently, I haven't put any of those on certificate, and I don't shoot any of those. Although, again, I do have a plan to put one of the Beaumont Adams, one that's mechanically sound, onto a certificate, and at some point shoot that. So I can own it off certificate because it's an antique and I don't shoot it. But if I want to start shooting it, then I have to put it on my firearms certificate, and I do have a slot for it there waiting. So I hope this has been an interesting overview to the firearms that I own and shoot currently, and also what's possible in the UK, and also what's not possible in the UK. The UK is not a particularly firearms friendly country, which is really, really sad, because it did used to be. Up until World War I, rifle shooting was hugely popular, and the volunteer movement, the army volunteer movement, in the late Victorian period and through the Edwardian period, which my own great-grandfather was very active. He was a colonel in the Army Volunteers and fought in World War I in the Royal Army Medical Corps. A huge number of people were very active in the Army volunteer movement and involved in rifle shooting as a sport and as a military volunteer preparation activity. And there were rifle butts, as they're called, target ranges, all over the country. Like, loads of small towns and villages had rifle butts and people used to shoot. And really after World War I, the UK government started clamping down heavily on shooting, on gun ownership and on shooting as a sport, and gradually kind of slowly strangled it. So really, we happy few in the UK who are still shooting are very much a minority, despite the fact, 500,000 shotgun owners, about 150 something thousand firearms owners, but nevertheless, compared to our 65 million population, that's fairly small. Sad times, there we go. And I personally know quite a few British shooters who, as partly through love of their hobby, have moved abroad to Canada, America, Switzerland, France and elsewhere. Pretty much anywhere is easier to own firearms and shoot, certainly in Europe. I know some countries have even more restrictive laws than the UK. Japan does, for example. Japan's very, very strict on firearms, even more than the UK is. But that's the way it is, that's what we live with. But hopefully you've seen in this video that if you're in the UK or thinking of coming to the UK and you want to shoot, there are still lots of things you can shoot. You can shoot certain types of pistols in certain circumstances. Shotguns are pretty much easy to shoot in the UK. We're very shotgun friendly here. And there are a number of rifles, and you can shoot semi-automatic modern type rifles if they're in 22 LR. I should also mention as well, you can have military type rifles in what we call straight pull. So because they essentially class as a bolt action, you could have an AR-15 in 5.56, or you could have an AK-47 in 7.62 Russian, if it's on a straight pull, which means you need to straight pull before each shot, which essentially makes it bolt action. So there are lots of things you can still shoot in the UK. We just can't shoot everything that you can in a lot of other European countries, and indeed obviously in America and such like. Anyway, I hope this has been interesting and useful, and thanks for watching. I hope I see you back on the channel really soon. Cheers, folks. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.